more unsettling when it starts blending with paranoia, nightmares, and psychological collapse. These films begin with strange worlds, mysterious characters, or supernatural ideas, but gradually spiral into something darker, stranger, and completely unhinged by the end. 10. Bordello of Blood, 1996. What starts as a sleazy private investigation quickly turns into supernatural chaos involving hidden creatures, secret rituals, and an ancient evil operating behind neon lights and underground corridors. The movie mixes horror and fantasy with exaggerated dark comedy, creating an atmosphere that constantly swings between ridiculous and surprisingly gothic. Dennis Miller brings sarcastic energy to the lead role, while Angie Everhart fully embraces the film's over-the-top tone. Beneath the campy surface, there's a strange dreamlike quality to the movie, especially once the story descends deeper into supernatural madness. The practical creature effects and blood-soaked visuals give everything a very specific late 90s horror atmosphere that feels chaotic in the best way. 9. In the Mouth of Madness, 1994. An insurance investigator searching for a missing horror writer slowly begins losing his grip on reality as fiction, and reality start blending together in terrifying ways. John Carpenter builds the movie like a psychological nightmare, where every answer only makes the situation more disturbing. Sam Neill gives one of his best performances, perfectly capturing a man unraveling piece by piece as the world around him becomes increasingly impossible to understand. The atmosphere grows heavier with every scene, shifting from mystery into full cosmic horror madness. Strange towns, unnatural behavior, and surreal imagery slowly consume the story until reality itself feels unstable. Few films capture the feeling of descending into insanity this effectively. 8. Dagon, 2001. After surviving a violent storm at sea, a man and his friends become trapped in an isolated coastal town filled with terrifying secrets connected to ancient sea gods and forbidden rituals. Stuart Gordon adapts Lovecraftian horror with a grimy, nightmarish atmosphere that constantly feels wet, decayed, and hostile. The deeper the protagonist explores the village, the more disturbing the environment becomes. The creature effects and transformations give the film an increasingly grotesque energy, while the story spirals further into paranoia and hopelessness. Francisco Rabal and Ezra Godin help ground the madness with performances that feel genuinely desperate. The movie becomes more surreal and horrifying with every passing scene.
Stay with me, please.
7. Paper House, 1988. A lonely young girl discovers that the strange house she keeps drawing in her sketchbook somehow exists within her dreams, creating a fantasy world that slowly becomes darker and more threatening. Bernard Rose directs the film with a soft, dreamlike atmosphere that gradually transforms into psychological horror. The fantasy elements feel deeply tied to childhood fears, loneliness, and emotional confusion rather than traditional adventure. Charlotte Burke gives an unusually natural performance that makes the emotional side of the story feel believable even as reality begins collapsing around her. The dream world itself changes constantly, becoming more distorted and frightening the longer the story continues. 6. Wicked Stepmother, 1989. A mysterious woman with supernatural powers enters a family's life, bringing bizarre magical events and growing chaos with her. Larry Cohen approaches the material like a dark fantasy comedy that keeps becoming stranger scene by scene. Bette Davis gives the movie a surreal presence, especially because the production itself became famously troubled during filming. The atmosphere feels unstable in a way that almost adds to the movie's weird charm, as if the story itself is slowly falling apart. Magic, body switching, talking animals, and exaggerated performances collide into something that barely feels connected to normal storytelling. It's messy, bizarre, and strangely hypnotic.
That's right. Fight me.
With everything you've got! Stand up, Esmeralda!
5. Lauren, 1989. Set in a quiet village haunted by disappearances and buried secrets, the story follows a young girl slowly uncovering terrifying truths hidden beneath the surface of her isolated community. The movie creates an atmosphere that feels cold, dreamlike, and constantly uneasy. Robert Seigel uses fog-filled streets, dark forests, and candle-lit interiors to make nearly every scene feel trapped between fantasy and nightmare. The story unfolds slowly, allowing paranoia and mystery to build naturally. Lauren herself becomes increasingly isolated as the line between imagination and reality starts to blur around her. The result feels haunting long after it ends. 4. Mr. Designer, 1987. A successful artist becomes consumed by obsession, beauty, and illusion as his carefully controlled world slowly transforms into something surreal and psychologically unstable. The film mixes gothic fantasy with psychological drama in a way that feels deeply unsettling. Oleg Teptsov directs with an almost hypnotic visual style, using silence, shadows, and strange imagery to create an atmosphere filled with emotional decay. The main character's growing detachment from reality becomes the center of the story, making even ordinary scenes feel uncomfortable. Instead of relying on monsters or violence, the movie creates madness through mood and psychological collapse. 3. The Beast and the Magic Sword, 1983. A cursed warrior battling a monstrous affliction travels across dangerous lands searching for a way to end his suffering. Paul Naschy combines werewolf mythology, samurai fantasy, and gothic horror into one surprisingly ambitious dark fantasy adventure. The film constantly shifts between action, tragedy, and supernatural horror while embracing its strange premise completely seriously. Naschy gives the lead character genuine emotional weight beneath the monster makeup, making the curse feel tragic rather than purely monstrous. The atmosphere becomes increasingly surreal as the hero encounters magical enemies, ancient legends, and violent confrontations across snowy landscapes and shadowy castles. 2. Thrilling Bloody Sword, 1981. Filled with supernatural martial arts battles, curses, betrayals, and bizarre fantasy powers, the movie throws the audience directly into chaotic sword and sorcery madness. The story constantly escalates with strange villains, magical abilities, and exaggerated action scenes that almost feel dreamlike in their intensity. The colorful costumes and stylized combat create an atmosphere that feels both theatrical and completely unpredictable. Characters appear and disappear rapidly as the narrative becomes more surreal and emotionally unstable. The movie rarely pauses to explain itself, which somehow makes the fantasy world feel even stranger. It's chaotic in a way only early 80s fantasy cinema could achieve. 1. Pastoral, To Die in the Country, 1974. Blending autobiography, fantasy, memory, and surrealism, the film follows a young boy growing up inside a world that constantly shifts between reality and nightmare. Shuji Terayama creates imagery that feels deeply personal and psychologically overwhelming, turning ordinary locations into dreamlike stages filled with strange performers, symbolic figures, and distorted memories. The movie rarely follows conventional narrative structure, instead unfolding like fragments of emotion and subconscious thought. Every scene feels unstable, as if reality itself is slowly breaking apart. The fantasy elements are tied directly to identity, trauma, and artistic obsession, making the experience feel haunting and intensely surreal. By the end, the film fully descends into emotional and visual madness. If you enjoyed this journey into the hidden corners of cinema, don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and most importantly, subscribe to Cinemira for more strange, forgotten, and fascinating films. Your support keeps this adventure alive. And trust me, there's so much more to discover together.